What would you do if you witnessed the son you raised for decades stand by and watch his wife shove his own mother into a wall until she bruised, and then casually lie that it was just an accident? My name is Hendrik van der Berg. As a chief architect and real estate developer in Amsterdam, I always believed that family was the strongest foundation a man could build. But I was wrong. On my wife's 65th birthday, the deafening sound of shattering ceramics on the oak floor officially brought down all my illusions. Behind the ruthless violence of my daughter-in-law, Fenna, behind the seemingly cowardly downcast eyes of Lars, my only son, lay a disgusting parasitic scheme silently devouring us from the inside. They mistook my endurance and silence for submission. But they didn't know that deep inside my office drawer lay a top-secret contract, a weapon that could wipe out a $1.5 million asset and strip away their entire lives with just one signature. What cruel secret is hiding beneath the facade of a perfect family? Please hit like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment about what makes you the most furious before we uncover this horrifying truth together. Our ancient villa in the Oud-Zuid district of Amsterdam was filled with candlelight and the scent of white lilies that night. The towering windows cast long shadows on the carefully polished oak floor. It should have been a perfect night. My 65th birthday should have been a fulfilling milestone for a woman who had spent 43 years of her life nurturing this family. But family is sometimes a beautiful painting on a cracking wall, and you only realize it when the paint starts to peel. The party started at 7:30 in the evening. My son Lars walked through the front door with his wife, Fenna, and our little 6-year-old granddaughter, Mila. From the very first moment, Fenna took off her designer coat and draped it over the armrest of the sofa. I felt the familiar suffocating air swirling in the house. Fenna always had an uncanny ability to turn any space she entered into a stage where she was the center of attention, and everyone else was just an audience forced to applaud. That dinner was a series of judgments wrapped in a delicately fake shell. Fenna complained that the roast lamb was slightly overcooked, whined about the candlelight giving her a headache, and hinted that the landscape paintings hanging on the dining room wall looked totally outdated. I sat quietly at the head of the table, smiling patiently. I was used to swallowing my daughter-in-law's sarcasm. I am a mother, and mothers often choose silence to keep the family meal from falling apart. But what broke my heart was not Fenna's insolent attitude. What made my chest tighten, beat by beat, was Lars's eyes. My son, the child I had stayed awake countless nights to nurse when he was sick with a fever. The man Hendrik and I had poured all our resources into raising, just sat there. Whenever Fenna raised her sarcastic voice, Lars just looked down at his plate. He didn't say a word. He didn't protect me. He didn't ask his wife to stop. He just withdrew, creating a safe space for himself, and pushed all of his wife's sharpness toward me and Hendrik. I used to think it was cowardice. But tonight, watching his hands slice the meat rhythmically and indifferently, while his wife attacked his own family, I suddenly shuddered to realize something more terrifying. It wasn't cowardice. It was a calculated habit. Lars always stepped back to let others bear the storm, while he played the innocent bystander. By 9:15, the underlying conflict reached its breaking point. Fenna's eyes stopped in the middle of the dining table, where I had placed the heirloom ceramic plate. It was the last keepsake my mother left behind before she passed away. The blue patterns on the white ceramic had faded over the years, and there was a small chip on the edge from a time I accidentally dropped it as a child. To me, it was priceless. To Fenna, it was trash. She sneered, that it looked so outdated, a dry smirk on her face without a single ray of warmth. She tapped her silver fork gently on the edge of the plate, creating a piercing, shrill sound. She said she really didn't understand why I would display this piece of junk on a luxury dining table, claiming it ruined the entire aesthetic of the dinner. The air in the dining room seemed to be drained completely. The clinking of cutlery stopped abruptly. Hendrik, my husband, slammed his crystal glass down on the table. I knew he was trying to control his fury. Hendrik is a quiet man, but his silence always carries the weight of a mountain. I hastily stood up. I said I would put it away, keeping my voice as gentle as possible. I just wanted to put out this fire. I reached out, intending to lift the plate off the table. But I didn't have time to do that. In barely 3 seconds, everything exploded. Fenna suddenly stood up, her eyes bloodshot with unreasonable anger, seeing that I was about to take the plate before she could finish pouring out her sarcasm. She swung her arm. It wasn't an accidental brush. It was a violent, cruel, and deliberate push. The palm of her hand slammed hard into my shoulder. Losing my balance, I stumbled backward. The heel of my shoe caught the edge of the rug. Crash! The heirloom ceramic plate slipped from my hands, falling freely and shattering into dozens of fragments on the oak floor. The sharp sound of breaking ceramics tore through the space. But that sound was immediately drowned out by the thud of my body slamming hard against the wall behind me. A piercing pain shot up from my shoulder, straight to the top of my head. I slid down, clutching my shoulder, my face burning with shock. Everything happened so fast that my brain couldn't process it. I, a 65-year-old woman, had just been shoved to the ground by my own daughter-in-law right at my birthday party. Little Mila was startled and dropped her fork, starting to scream and cry. The cries of a 6-year-old child echoed in the suffocating dining room. Hendrik rushed to my side, his large hands supporting my back, his eyes darkening. When he looked up at Fenna, I saw a chillingly cold fury in my husband's eyes. Hendrik roared, demanding to know what the hell had just happened, his voice deep but carrying the destructive force of an earthquake. Fenna stood there, her face flushed red. She wasn't panicked at all. She wasn't remorseful at all. She brazenly tilted her chin up, letting out a blatant lie so disgusting it made me sick. She claimed I had bumped into her and that she hadn't done anything. I squeezed my eyes shut, swallowing my tears back down. But what truly made my heart drop dead, what made the entire worldview of a mother completely collapse that night, wasn't Fenna's push. I looked up at Lars. My son was sitting less than a meter away. He had seen everything. He had seen his wife swing her arm. He had seen his mother fall and hit her shoulder against the wall. I waited for him to stand up. I waited for him to protect me. I waited for the righteous anger of a son, but Lars just slowly placed his napkin on the table. He looked down, his eyes avoiding the bruise forming on my shoulder. He hesitated, then told his father that it was probably just an accident and that Fenna didn't do it on purpose. Not a single word asking if his mother was in pain. Not a single act of shelter. He chose to make excuses for violence. He chose to throw away this mother to maintain his own fake shell of peace. Fenna's push caused me physical pain, but it was Lars's cowardice and cruelty that was the knife that tore my heart to shreds. Silence enveloped the villa, a thick, suffocating silence. Hendrik slowly stood up straight. He didn't scream. He didn't explain. He just stared at the sun we had spent our whole lives raising. He told them to get out. Hendrik's voice was terrifyingly calm. It contained no emotion, only absolute finality. Lars stammered, his face finally showing a look of panic. Hendrik emphasized every single word. his ice-cold voice cutting through Mila's crying, demanding that they get the hell out of his house. 10 minutes later, their car disappeared into the Amsterdam fog. Around midnight, I sat blankly alone at the kitchen table. The dim yellow light shone down on the purple bruise on my shoulder blade, which had now begun to turn a dark swollen color. Everything around was eerily quiet. I heard the sweeping sound of a broom out in the dining room. Hendrik was personally cleaning up every broken piece of the heirloom ceramic plate. A while later, he walked into the kitchen, sitting down on the chair across from me. His large hands tightly grasped my hand. I looked at my husband, the wrinkles on his forehead deeply etched with absolute disappointment. The resigning instinct of a mother rose up again. I didn't want this family to break apart. I didn't want my son to be chased out of our lives, I whispered to him, tears finally spilling from the corners of my eyes. I begged him not to make a big deal out of it, saying that Fenna probably didn't do it on purpose, and that I didn't want Lars to lose his family because of me. Hendrik looked at me. His eyes held no pity, but a deep, profound sorrow. He looked at the bruise on my shoulder, then at my enduring tears. In that moment, I saw a boundary that had just been permanently crossed. Hendrik's concession had officially ended. He didn't answer my plea. He gently let go of my hand, stood up, and turned to walk away. I sat there in the dim light of the kitchen, quietly watching my husband's sturdy back. He didn't go up to the bedroom. He walked straight toward the end of the hallway, stepping into his dark office. Through the slightly open door, I saw Hendrik turn on the desk lamp. He bent down, pulling open the bottom drawer of the oak filing cabinet. My heart suddenly skipped a beat. I knew what was inside that drawer. 8 years ago, Hendrik had personally drafted and stored a real estate file in there, the contract for the townhouse in Amstelveen where Lars and Fenna were living. He pulled out that dusty file, placing it neatly under the yellow light. Hendrik is an architect. Throughout our 43 years of living together, he had only ever told me one single sentence about ruined structures, and tonight, watching his back sink into the darkness of the office, I knew that sentence was echoing in his head, cold, ruthless, and absolute. He always said that a rotting foundation cannot be patched up. My office was submerged in the thick silence of the Amsterdam night. There was only a faint yellow halo from the desk lamp casting down on the oak surface, shining directly onto the thick file I had just pulled from the bottom drawer. 8 years. This file had lain dormant in the dark for 8 years, covered in a thin layer of forgotten dust. I am an architect, a real estate developer. My whole life is tied to blueprints, concrete blocks, and load-bearing systems. I always believed that if you built a strong enough foundation, the building could withstand any storm. 8 years ago, I thought I was pouring such a foundation for my son's marriage. $1,500,000 in cash. That was the price I paid to outright buy the townhouse in the quiet suburb of Amstelveen, giving Lars and Fenna a shelter when they had nothing in their hands. They walked into that house, enjoyed every square meter of the massive asset, and over time, they deluded themselves into thinking they were the true owners. But in my world, power does not lie in illusions. Power lies in absolute data. I flipped through the thick pages, skimming over the dry legal clauses until my eyes stopped at Section 7, Paragraph C. I had personally drafted this clause, an invisible emergency brake that I hoped I would never have to touch. The rent-to-own agreement will be terminated immediately, with a 30-day notice if the occupant's behavior poses a threat to the safety or health of any member of the Vanderberg family. A legal document has no emotions. It doesn't know how to cry, it doesn't know how to be outraged, and it cannot be manipulated by fake tears. It is simply a mechanism of gravity. When a pillar is pulled out, everything will collapse. The darkening bruise on Beatrix's shoulder was the exact trigger for that mechanism. The next morning, I picked up the phone and called Anouk de Vries. Anouk is a senior notary who has stood by my side in every project for the past 20 years. She is an iron-willed woman, always seeing through every risk. Hendrik, Anouk's voice rang out steadily on the other end of the line. You're calling so early. Is there a new project? I need you to activate Section 7, Paragraph C of the Amstelveen real estate contract, I said, my voice so calm that even I felt cold. Immediately, there was a prolonged silence. The clicking of the keyboard from Anouk's end stopped. Hendrik, are you talking about Lars's house? Activating Paragraph C means issuing an eviction notice. The contract will be completely cancelled. She sighed, her voice lowering with the warning of an old friend. Do you understand what this means? Lars and Fenna will completely lose the house. The kids will be out on the street. And your relationship with your son might never be salvaged. Do you want to think about it some more? I stared at the contract. In my mind, the image of Lars looking down at his food plate, cowardly making excuses for the person who had just hit his mother, appeared vividly. The concession had ended. The foundation was rotten. I am certain, I replied. Send the notice, Anouk. Don't leave any loopholes. At exactly 9:30 on Wednesday morning, a legally absolute email was sent from Anouk's office. By 2 in the afternoon, a uniformed courier knocked on the door of the Amstelveen house, placing the cold termination notice right into Lars's hands. And the mechanism of destruction officially began. Exactly 15 minutes after the courier left, the phone on my desk vibrated violently. Lars's name flashed on the screen. 15 minutes was all it took for their vain egos and arrogance to completely shatter. I picked up the phone, pressed it to my ear, but didn't say a word. Dad, what is this? Lars's voice broke in sheer panic, completely opposite to his deafening silence at the birthday party. Dad, someone just handed me a piece of paper. They said the contract is cancelled. There must be some mistake. There is no mistake, I replied, my voice deep and cold. You received the notice. The contract is terminated. Dad, you can't do this. We've lived here for 8 years. We can't lose this house. From the other end of the line, I heard Fenna's shrill scream echoing in. She snatched the phone from her husband. What the hell are you doing, Hendrik? She yelled, her insolence undiminished. You can't strip us of our house just because of a minor misunderstanding. She bumped into the wall herself. I didn't push her. Are you going to throw us out on the street? Ruin little Mila's life just because of this cheap family drama? I closed my eyes, feeling a surge of disgust in my veins. Throughout that panicked call, not once, absolutely not once, did Lars or Fenna ask about Beatrix's health. There wasn't a single question asking if his mother was in pain, not a single apology, no matter how fake. Their minds were entirely consumed by the one $5 million asset slipping from their hands. They intended to use a 6-year-old granddaughter as a shield, an emotional blackmail tool to force me to step back. The move-out date is 30 days from today, I said, cutting off Fenna's screams. Try to overstay, and the police will be the ones talking to you. I hung up, tossing the phone onto the desk. The suffocation of physical violence on the birthday night had now transformed into a more toxic weapon, psychological manipulation. In the days that followed, they frantically bombarded my phone. 11 missed calls, countless lengthy text messages alternating between begging and blaming. Upon realizing I had blocked all contact, Fenna shifted her target to the softer one. On Friday noon, I was at a construction site when I received a call from Beatrix. Her voice trembled. hesitating amidst the noise. "Hendrik, I'm at the Kringloopwinkel charity shop. Fenna is here. She blocked my car. She brought Mila with her." My heart tightened. I rushed to my car, slamming on the gas like a madman through the narrow streets of central Amsterdam. As I pushed the door into Kringloopwinkel, the smell of old clothes and dust hit my nose. What caught my eye was a scene that made my blood boil. Fenna was blocking Beatrix, crying uncontrollably. Little Mila clung tightly to her mother's skirt, her big round eyes looking at her grandmother in bewilderment. A few customers and volunteers in the shop were standing at a distance, whispering and pointing. Fenna was playing the perfect victim. "Mom, please talk to Dad." She sobbed, deliberately speaking loud enough for the people around to hear. "Are you going to throw your granddaughter out on the street? Can you bear to see Mila without a home? I swear I just accidentally slipped that day. You know I love you, Mom." Her cruelty lay in the fact that she knew exactly Beatrix's weakness. She used the child as a hostage, using the gaze of the crowd to corner a 65-year-old woman she had just beaten. Beatrix stood there, her shoulders shrunk, her eyes full of painful resignation. Enough! I stepped forward, my voice booming like thunder, completely cutting off her act. Fenna turned around, startled. The victim mask on her face stiffened when she met my eyes. I stepped up to shield Beatrix, looking straight into Fenna's eyes. "Listen to me clearly. Stay away from my wife. If you dare to stalk her one more time, a restraining order will be delivered to your hands before you can cry another tear." I supported Beatrix's arm, leading her out of the store, leaving Fenna standing frozen amidst the sympathetic looks of the crowd. On the drive back home, the space was submerged in a heavy silence. I gripped the steering wheel, my mind churning with unanswered questions. There was an absurdity tearing at my thoughts. Lars's extreme panic. A cowardly man, always avoiding conflict. Why would he cling to the house so desperately, to the point of completely ignoring his own mother's safety? Why did he let his wife cause trouble, draining the family's emotions time and time again, just to protect inanimate walls? That cowardice. Was it really cowardice? Or was it a cover for a deeper nature that I had never seen through? Those questions continued to haunt me until evening. Amsterdam was pouring rain. I was sitting in my office staring at the signed contract when the phone screen suddenly lit up. A strange number. I hesitated for a beat, then pressed answer. The voice on the other end wasn't Fenna's screaming, nor Lars's stammering. It was a woman's voice, articulate, calm, yet trembling unusually. I recognized that voice. Sanne Visser, Fenna's biological sister, a school psychologist. Hendrik. Sanne's voice came through the crackling static, carrying the weight of a secret buried for too long. "I'm sorry for calling late, but you need to know the truth. Violence is not their only secret. Violence is not their only secret." Sanne Visser's voice came through the phone, articulate, calm, but sharp as a scalpel slicing straight into the Amsterdam night. In my silent office, the sound of rain hitting the double-glazed windows suddenly became distant, giving way to a chilling sensation slowly creeping down my spine. I gripped the phone tightly, my breathing unconsciously slowing down. I asked what she meant, trying to keep my voice from trembling. There was a silence on the other end. I could hear the deep breath of a psychologist preparing to break her own rule of silence. "About 4 years ago," Sanne began, every word heavy. "Fenna once pushed Lars. She lost control and threw a vase at her husband. It hit Lars on the shoulder. The instinct of a father in me immediately rose up. A burning heat rushed straight to my brain. I demanded to know why she didn't tell me, anger replacing my shock. I said my son was abused, and she, as the sister of the abuser, chose to hide it. No, Hendrik. Hear me out, Sanne interrupted me, her voice suddenly becoming terrifyingly cold and rational. She said I was reacting exactly how Lars wanted people to react. She said she had intended to speak up, but then she realized a much more horrifying truth. Lars was not a victim at all. I frowned, asking what the hell she was talking about. She explained patiently that she is a psychologist and sees patterns that others ignore. But her voice trembled with disgust. She asked if I ever noticed how Lars always stayed silent when Fenna started to get angry. That silence was not submission. It was a calculated provocation. He knew exactly his wife's weaknesses. He would constantly use subtle sarcastic remarks, mentally cornering Fenna, and right at the moment she was about to explode, he stepped back. He shut down. He played the role of a pitiful, gentle husband, enduring the wrath of a crazy wife. The room spun. The image of Lars looking down at his food plate on Beatrix's birthday night suddenly flashed through my mind like lightning. I asked why a man would do that to his own marriage, feeling my throat go dry. Because it is a negotiation leverage, Sanne replied, ruthlessly tearing off the final mask. Lars used Fenna's chaos to turn himself into a pitiful victim. And a pitiful victim always needs to be compensated. She told me to think back. After every time Fenna caused trouble at my house, what did Lars do? The call ended, but Sanne's question still echoed in my mind like sledgehammers hitting a brick wall. I slowly lowered the phone onto the oak desk. The air was so suffocating that I felt it hard to breathe. I pulled the chair, slumping down in front of the computer screen. The blue light cast on my face in the middle of the dark room. Sanne's words were just a psychological hypothesis. As an architect, I don't work with hypotheses. I work with data, with technical drawings, with undeniable evidence. I opened my email inbox. The search bar appeared. I typed the name Lars and began filtering all the email history over the past 4 years. Hundreds of emails appeared. I opened the drawer, taking out the small notebook I often used to note down family events. I started cross-checking. Christmas, 4 years ago. Fenna made a fuss at the family party because she criticized the gift Beatrix gave Mila. That day, Lars sat in silence, looking extremely miserable. I looked over at the screen. December 26th at 8 in the morning, an email from Lars. He said he was truly sorry about yesterday. He said Fenna was under a lot of pressure lately. He asked if I could co-sign a $50,000 loan for him to upgrade the kitchen interior. He said he thought a new space would help her feel more relaxed. Our wedding anniversary, 2.5 years ago. Fenna threw a wine glass onto the porch floor over a minor friction, then left halfway through. The next day, another email from Lars. He said he was very ashamed. He said he was trying to preserve this family for Mila. He asked if I could transfer 5% of the Canal Project shares to him. He said he needed a steady cash flow to make Fenna feel more secure about the future. And last week, Beatrix's 65th birthday party. The darkening bruise on the shoulder of my wife of 43 years. An undeniable act of physical violence. My heart skipped a beat. My hands trembled as I clicked on the inbox. An email sent from Lars on the exact morning after the birthday night, just a few hours before the house contract cancellation order was activated by me. Subject regarding last night. The content stated that he didn't know what to say, that last night's event was a tragedy, that he stayed up all night thinking, that he was considering sending Fenna to a long-term psychological therapy in Switzerland. But the cost was too expensive. He asked if I could advance a portion of my retirement fund for him to take care of this. He also added that the house in Amstelveen needed to be fully transferred to his name to be used as collateral in case of need. I let go of the mouse. A dry click echoed in the absolute silence. The initial shock was quickly incinerated by a wave of nausea, churning in my stomach. My worldview wobbled, shattered, and then rebuilt itself into a monstrous shape. The son I always thought was weak, cowardly weak, turned out to be the most vicious psychological architect I had ever known. He wasn't weak at all. He was a smart parasite. He deliberately sharpened his wife's claws, incited her to tear the flesh of his own family, just so he could stand there, catch the falling drops of blood, and use them as ink to write begging letters for money. He priced the family's peace in cash. He priced the bruise on his biological mother's shoulder with collateral and my retirement fund. The agonizing pain of a betrayed father completely disappeared. At that moment, there was no longer a father sitting in the office. There was only Hendrik van der Berg, a real estate developer staring at the blueprint of a severely structurally flawed building. A foundation that had been hollowed out by termites from the inside. There was no way to fix it. The only way was to plant explosives in the main pillars and bring down the entire system. The following days passed in a gloomy, suffocating atmosphere. A storm rolled into Amsterdam, bringing endless, drizzling rain. I refused to answer all phone calls from Lars and Fenna. The eviction order had been set. The countdown was ticking every second. They were like rats running wildly in a burning house until late Saturday night. I was standing in the garage, checking the engine of my classic car under the dim neon lights when I heard the sloshing sound of footsteps coming from the sloped driveway. The pattering sound of rain outside was suddenly torn apart by the sound of the side door opening. A silhouette appeared. It was Lars. He stood there, his whole body soaking wet. His expensive wool coat clung to his body, rainwater streaming down his pale and haggard face. His eyes were red, dark-circled, carrying a look of utter despair. He looked exactly like an abandoned child, a perfect victim of harsh circumstances. He called out to me, his voice hoarse and broken. I stopped my hands, slowly placing the wrench down on the metal table. The clinking sound rang out coldly. I said nothing, just stood there, my arms crossed over my chest. Looking straight at the person staging his final act, Lars took 2 steps forward, his shoulders trembling violently. He looked down, his hands clutched tightly together, as if trying to suppress a soul-tearing pain. He choked out that he couldn't take it anymore, tears beginning to mix with the rainwater on his cheeks. He said Sanne was right. He said Fenna had completely lost control. He admitted he was wrong to try and endure her all these years just to keep a family for Miller. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading, full of remorse. A look that, if it were 10 days ago, would have surely broken my heart. He firmly stated that he would get a divorce, sounding like a vow of awakening. He promised he would end everything. He apologized for letting his mother get hurt. He said he was truly, truly sorry. He stood there, soaked, shivering, waiting for an embrace of forgiveness, waiting for the arms of a father to shelter a lost son who had just realized his mistakes. A moment that seemed like late repentance, a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. I stared into his eyes, the silence in the garage now thickening, tight as a violin string about to snap. Waiting for a sentence that I knew for sure, with all the rot inside him, would be spoken. I stood with my arms crossed, leaning against the hood of the classic car, letting the silence weigh heavily on Lars's trembling shoulders. The sound of rain pattering on the tin roof of the closed garage seemed to heighten the suffocating, thick atmosphere. My soaking wet son still stood there, his eyes red, perfectly playing the role of someone who had just experienced a painful awakening. He had apologized. He had promised to get a divorce. He had painted a perfect picture of the late repentance of a lost son wanting to turn back. And I waited, with all the cold patience of a father who had seen through to the very core of his son's nature. Lars took a deep breath. He licked his pale lips, his eyes avoiding my stare, and lowered his voice to the most timid and submissive level possible. He asked if Fenna left. Could I let him keep the house? He said it was just for him and Mila. He claimed he needed a stable place so the little girl wouldn't be shocked. That question was uttered lightly, but in the quiet space of the garage, it echoed with the destructive force of a bomb. The last thread of family ties, fragile and frayed, was officially cut. All feelings of pity, all the inner turmoil in my heart, suddenly evaporated without a trace. The rage disappeared too. Instead, a state of absolute zero engulfed my mind. That was no longer the state of a father facing his son. It was the state of a chief architect standing in front of a severely structurally flawed building, holding the blueprint and deciding to press the detonate button to bring the whole thing down. I repeated his words about keeping the house, my voice flat, without a single ray of emotion. Lars nodded hastily, thinking my silence was a sign of softening. He said yes and swore he would change. He promised to pay the maintenance fees himself. He pleaded that he just needed to keep the ownership. I cut him off with a razor-sharp voice, mentioning Christmas 4 years ago. Lars froze. The forced smile on his lips stiffened. He stammered, asking what I was talking about. I took a step forward, narrowing the distance between us. The dim neon light shone on his face, which was beginning to show signs of panic. I reminded him that Fenna had made a fuss at the family party. I noted that the next day, he sent an email asking for a $50,000 loan to upgrade the kitchen, using the excuse of helping his wife feel better. Lars's mouth dropped open, his breath catching in his throat. I continued, every word spoken like a hammer smashing his mask, recalling my and his mother's wedding anniversary 2.5 years ago. I stated that Fenna threw a wine glass and left. I reminded him that the next morning, he asked me to transfer 5% of the canal project shares. And last week, right the morning after the night, his mother was pushed to the point of bruising her shoulder blade. He sent an email asking for a portion of my retirement fund and demanding the Amstelveen house be fully transferred to his name. Lars took a step back, his legs seemingly unable to stand firm, all the blood drained from his face. For the first time in my life, I saw absolute, genuine, and undisguised panic clearly showing in my son's eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. The psychological manipulation system he had painstakingly built over many years had been completely exposed. He stammered that I was misunderstanding, reaching out his hand desperately. He claimed it was just a coincidence and that he only wanted to protect his family. I told him he wasn't protecting anyone, my voice dropping but carrying the weight of gravity. I said he was the one standing in the shadows, sharpening his wife's claws, inciting her to tear the flesh of his own family, just so he could use his mother's blood as ink to write letters begging for money. I told him he had turned abuse into a financial transaction tool. Tears began to spill from Lars's eyes. He sobbed, kneeling on the cold garage floor. He started howling pleas, making excuses about pressure, about suppression, about how he had no intention of hurting anyone. But those tears were now just meaningless drops of water to me. Manipulation no longer works when the audience has seen through the play. I stared down at my son, feeling a complete emptiness in my chest. I asked him if he knew what hurt the most, every word distinct, sharp as a knife, piercing straight into his mind. Lars looked up, his eyes drenched in fear. I told him that every conversation eventually always came back to this house. I turned around, walking toward the door connecting to the house. I stated there would be no more concessions. I confirmed the move-out day remained unchanged. I ordered him to never come back here looking like that again. Lars's sobbing echoed in the closed garage, but I locked the door tightly, locking him and his own rot in the outside world. On Thursday morning of that week, Amsterdam was submerged in a thick, grey and cold fog. I woke up before dawn, sitting quietly in my office with a cup of black coffee. At exactly 8 o'clock in the morning, my phone vibrated. It was a message from Anouk de Vries, confirming that the law enforcement team and the notary office staff were present at the house in Amstelveen. There was no mercy. The law was executed with its absolute apathy and precision. The contract was completely cancelled. The $1,500,000 asset was officially seized. A few hours later, I received a call from Sanne Visser. She reported that Lars's family had been officially evicted. Gone was the glamorous shell, gone was the disguise of successful people. Lars, Fenner, and little Mila were forced to drift to a cheap, shabby hotel along the highway, right next to the noisy runway of Schiphol Airport. The systemic destruction was complete. The gravity of reality had brought down the entire illusion of power of the parasites. The townhouse in the quiet suburb of Amstelveen was now completely empty. The perfect paint, the large glass windows, the small garden in the back, all of it was now just a soulless, unoccupied space. It had once been a testament to a father's blind love, and also the scene of bottomless greed. I had withdrawn the foundation I provided. The flawed building had been brought down. 3 months after that event, I sat back in my dark office, facing the thick files on the oak desk. The process of selling the house in Amstelveen was finally complete. The real estate market doesn't care about family tragedies. It only cares about true value. I uncapped the gold fountain pen, a gift from Beatrix from many years ago. The light from the desk lamp shone down on the final transfer certificate. The blue ink glided across the paper. I signed a decisive, sharp signature without trembling at all. The transaction was closed. The laptop screen next to me lit up with a notification from the central bank. The money had been transferred to the pending account. A massive, cold number, but carrying the power to change destinies, $1,850,000. I stared at the unrounded string of numbers on the screen. Nearly $2 million in cash. To Lars and Fenner, this was their life's purpose, the thing they were willing to trade their humanity to seize. As for me, it was the aftermath of a tumor that had just been removed. I picked up the pen again, pulling a brand new bank transfer order toward me. I filled in the exact amount of $1,850,000 in the amount box. But when the pen tip moved to the destination account box, I didn't fill in my own name. My retirement fund didn't need this money. My villa didn't need this money. Such a massive asset, once stripped from the darkness, had to be returned to the light. I took a deep breath, pressing the pen tip firmly onto the paper to write down a completely different name. I stared at the blinking destination account space on the computer screen. 3 months had passed since that thick, foggy day when Lars, Fenner, and little Mila were evicted from the house in Amstelveen. 3 months for the real estate market to do the rest of its job, pricing the walls that once held greed and lies. The number displayed on the banking system screen was a cold and absolute streak of light, $1,850,000, nearly $2 million in cash. To Lars and Fenna, this was the destination of all manipulation. The reason they were willing to throw away family ties, turn a blind eye to violence, and trample on the dignity of their own family. But to me, an architect who had spent a lifetime measuring the durability of materials, this number was merely the remains of a tumor that had just been removed. If I kept this money, I would be keeping the pathogen. If I shared it with Lars in any form, I would continue to feed a parasite. My punishment was never about revenge. It was about purification. I placed my hands on the keyboard, typing each word slowly, clearly, and without trembling at all. The recipient name was Blythe Grope, the Emergency Support Fund for Women and Families Escaping Violence in the Netherlands. I pressed the Enter key. The screen loaded data for 2 seconds, and then a green notification appeared stating that the transaction was successful. $1,850,000. I didn't keep a single cent. I had transferred that entire massive asset out of the bloodline of the Van der Berg family. The house that once harbored violence, where my wife was pushed until her shoulder bruised, had now been liquidated to become a true lifeline for women and children desperately seeking an escape. An act of destroying the parasite system, but a rebirth for the vulnerable. I closed the laptop. A dry click echoed in the office, marking the complete end of an era of concession. 2 days later, the news that the massive fortune had vanished forever finally reached Lars. Lawyer Anouk de Vries had sent him the closing statement following proper legal procedures. My phone rang while I was standing on the back porch, watching Beatrix carefully watering the hydrangeas. Lars's name appeared. This time, I picked up. There was no screaming on the other end of the line. There were no threats or manipulative crying acts that he usually performed. Instead, there was only a heavy silence, the labored breathing of someone who had just been pushed into a bottomless abyss. He called out to me, his voice sounding hollow, hoarse, and broken. He asked if I had really donated everything. "Every single penny," I replied, my voice as calm as a winter lake. I heard a coughing sound, then a choked noise in his throat. Lars was standing amidst the ruins of his own life. He was in a shabby, cramped hotel room, the thin walls vibrating every time a roaring flight landed at Schiphol. His marriage with Fenna was in a bitter divorce process. Tears, manipulation, and playing the victim no longer worked. The gravity of reality had brought down his entire illusion of power. He hesitated, every word uttered as if scratched out. He said he guessed. He always thought there would be a little something left for him. He said that no matter what happened, he still thought I would leave a way out for him. He admitted that was probably the problem, a late and bitter awakening. Finally, with nothing left to cling to, the cowardly shell stripped away, Lars had to face his true nature. Ultimate selfishness. He had always believed that blood was a blank check with an endless limit, that family was a system he could drain unconditionally. I told him that he was right, and that was the entire problem, my voice dropping low. I told him the foundation had collapsed. I said that now he had to pick up the bricks himself and rebuild his own life. I hung up. The call ended. The toxic loop was completely cut off. Lars would have to walk on his own 2 feet, paying the price for the chaos he had helped create. The final binding thread between the parasite and the host was severed. I turned back into the house. The space in the ancient villa in Ode Zuid now held a completely different feeling. The suffocating, tense atmosphere, the wariness, every time the daughter-in-law's or son's name was mentioned, had disappeared without a trace. This silence was no longer suppressed resignation, but absolute serenity. Beatrix walked in from the garden, taking off her gardening gloves, a relieved smile blooming on her lips. The bruise on her shoulder from her 65th birthday night had long faded, but more importantly, the invisible wounds had stopped bleeding. She no longer had to tiptoe and whisper in her own home. She no longer had to swallow her tears to protect a son who was always ready to throw her away for his own benefit. For the first time in years, I saw absolute safety return to the eyes of the wife who had been with me for 43 years. That afternoon, the Amsterdam sky glowed with the warm orange of a sunset. Beatrix and I sat next to each other on the wooden bench on the back porch. No extra words were needed, no need to recall the past tragedies. Her presence here, peaceful and whole, was the only answer I needed. I reached out, gently grasping my wife's age-spotted hand. The hand that had gone through the empty-handed years with me, that had nurtured this family with all its love and endurance. Life sometimes forces you into the cruelest crossroads, forcing you to take a hammer to smash the very structure you bled to build. But as a man, a husband, an architect, you must know what the true pillar of your life is. The hardest choice is rarely between right and wrong. It is about choosing which loss you can live with. And I chose my wife instead of my son. Thank you for accompanying me to the very end of this tearing and profound story. If Hendrik and Beatrix's journey brought you valuable reflections, please hit like, share the video, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so we can continue to meet in the next storytelling videos. Through this story, I hope we all realize a core lesson. Family affection is sacred, but blood should never be used as a screen to condone greed, selfishness, and violence. Tolerance is only valuable when it is given to those who know how to appreciate it. When the boundary of respect is broken, establishing a steel boundary, though painful, is the only way to protect yourself and the people you truly love. Never lose yourself just to keep a rotting family shell. I wish you always peace and strength in your life choices. Goodbye and see you again.